Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is throwing some shade at House Republicans for their witness invitation to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., saying sarcastically of the GOP's allegiance to Israel, quote, they wouldn't be inviting someone that has trafficked in anti-Semitism just this past week. AOC was defending fellow squad member Jayapal as Republicans aim to censure her after she called Israel a racist state. You might recall last weekend a video was released of RFK Jr. suggesting that COVID was a bioweapon that disproportionately didn't affect Chinese people and Ashkenazi Jewish people.
Well, the Democratic presidential hopeful is still scheduled to testify before the House Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government tomorrow. When Majority Leader Steve Scalise was pressed to defend the invitation, here's what he had to say.
Well, I mean, he's a Democrat that's coming before talking about how you're seeing a kind of selective shutdown of opposing viewpoints by the Democrats, where they're taking people that have, and this is not relating, I mean, look, we're talking about our stand against anti-Semitism, and that's a problem the Democrat Party's got. But at the same time, you're seeing within the Democrat Party attempts to stifle opposing views of any kind. Political views that they don't like. Obviously, it's not just Republican views. You know, they don't like the fact that they've got somebody running against Joe Biden.
Meanwhile, former Congressman Joe Kennedy joined other members of his family in denouncing the remarks. He took to Twitter on Monday, posting, quote, my uncle's comments were hurtful and wrong. I unequivocally condemn what he said. I was watching CNN last night, and I saw Representative Jamie Raskin being interviewed, I think it was the 7 p.m. hour, and saying explicitly that it is incumbent on them to do everything they can to stop RFK Jr. from speaking at this forthcoming hearing.
Yeah, so there are a lot of parts to this story. So first off, it is, in the view of many people, including AOC, and the handful of other squad members that supported Jayapal here, a weird kind of entrenchment, a congressional protection of the idea that Israel cannot be criticized on the basis of its behavior toward Palestinians. Sure. If you're unwilling to recognize what so many international human rights organizations have recognized, including Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, a major Israeli group, T'Slim, sorry, I'm pronouncing that bizarrely, and the UN have all acknowledged that Israel is an apartheid state because of its policies that are designed specifically to protect a certain demographic reality in Israel, in which deny rights to Palestinians in the region, Arabs specifically, that are not denied to people who are Jewish. That is definitionally what apartheid is. And if you have a resolution, remember what the resolution actually says. It says that the state of Israel is not a racist or apartheid state. Okay, ignoring all of the international advice, but from the experts to the contrary, and then lumping that in with the claim that Congress rejects anti-Semitism and xenophobia. Well, obviously, everybody would agree to the second, but there's obviously a subjective difference of opinion on the first one. And when we're having a conversation about whether we're shutting down debate and whether that's inappropriate, passing a resolution that precludes the United States government from reckoning with the human rights abuses of one of our closest allies is a huge problem. And I think yesterday or the day before, our only Palestinian American member of Congress, Rashida Tlaib, took to the microphone to explain exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about an apartheid state. So let's play that really quickly.
Straight here. This is not something that's made up. The United Nations, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Israel's own largest human rights organization, B'Tselem, all agree that Israel is an apartheid state. To assert otherwise, Mr. Speaker, in the face of this just body of evidence is an attempt to deny the reality and to normalize violence of apartheid. This week, we're going to hear consistently that people touting about like, oh, this is bipartisan support here. Well, don't forget, this body, this Congress, supported the South African apartheid regime, and it was bipartisan as well. But you don't have to take it from me to understand the racism of an apartheid government. Let's take a moment just to hear.
And she goes on after that part of the clip to talk about specific statements by members of the Israeli government that referred to Palestinians as snakes that needed to be beheaded, and similar kinds of diminishing animalistic language that is often used when you want to marginalize an ethnic group, and in some cases in global history performed genocidal acts on an ethnic group. So I think it's, what do you make of that Republican leader trying to square the idea of wanting to have RFK Jr. on because freedom of speech is an issue and not suppressing people's ideas, but being part of a resolution which Congress overwhelmingly voted for that would prevent you from calling out a specific state, no matter what it does, apparently, no matter how much evidence there is that it is operating as an apartheid regime. Yes,
one starts to get the impression that accusations of anti-Semitism are wielded in bad faith in attempts to delegitimize, stigmatize, and shut down political speech on the other side, and that both parties are doing it. That's not to say there is no anti-Semitism in either political party. I do think comments, for instance, Representative Ilhan Omar had made a few years ago were more, and who that she apologized for. Maybe it was just a bad turn of phrase. I don't want to argue about it necessarily. This is not, but I agree. I don't know why we're taking votes on these. This is not frankly important. U.S. policy, not trying to micromanage or adjudicate what's going on in Israel. I find a lot of it objectionable. I think most Americans do too. I find it objectionable. Again, I will say this, and I support members of the Republican Party who have also made this view that we have a lot of priorities at home, and funding the bailout we give to the Israeli military is that consistent with an American first policy agenda? I don't particularly think so. So I don't, and I don't think it's fair to accuse Rashid Tlaib or Pramila Jayapal or anyone else for being anti-Semitic, for criticizing the government of Israel. The government of Israel is not the Jewish people. Even maybe she should have worded it or phrased it differently or something. I'm like totally uninterested in this, or especially uninterested in being mad about this. But now the Democrats have turned around, done exactly the same thing, taken statements made by RFK, who's running, by the way, for the presidency, for the nomination of their party, not the Republican Party, their party, and is coming to testify not about his opinions on Jewish issues or anything having to do with Jewish stuff or race stuff, but on how his speech was silenced, was censored on social media at the behest of the federal government. That is that issue before the committee. You could have someone, honest, even if you straightforwardly think someone's views are bad or crazy, but in the classical ACLU mode should not be suppressed, and we're still going to have witnesses from people like that again, 20 years ago, that would not have been a controversial thing among liberals, progressives, et cetera. That's what we're doing here. It's controversial now.
It's really disappointing that AOC chose to wield RFK Jr. in this way to defend her underlying point, which I think is a good one. What she should be focused on is why this particular issue, any criticism of Israeli foreign policy or Israeli domestic policy, is protected in a bipartisan way, where people go out of their way to pass resolutions when they can't come together on anything else. They can't come together for the homelessness crisis. They can't come together to vote for a bipartisan infrastructure bill, even as highways in Pennsylvania are falling apart. They can't come together on anything else. But you cannot, I think, credibly have, this is what AOC, I think, should have been saying.
Empty statements are easier to come together on, exactly. Honestly.
But it used to be, we used to live in a country, Robby, where everyone said that infrastructure, just roads and bridges, were the kind of things that the two parties could come together over. Not anymore. So I would have liked to have seen AOC talk about the hypocrisy of Republicans who want to have a hearing on free speech issues, but who would join in a resolution that silences criticism of a foreign government, and one that we are very heavily financially implicated in, and why it also seems to be the case that while there's a substantial appetite for cutting aid to Ukraine, there is no similar appetite for cutting aid to Israel, or at least connecting our aid to certain commitments on the civil rights and liberties front domestically.
Empty resolutions are the easiest thing for Congress to pass because they don't mean anything. They'll pass a resolution saying America is based. Great, who cares?
I think that one, I remember that from the last cycle.
More Rising right after this.